All right, welcome to the Sweet Science of Fighting podcast. Today we have Jahred Dell. Welcome, Jahred.
Thanks for having me, bro.
No, thanks for coming on. It's unfortunate we didn't get to meet up when you popped by Austin just I guess the other month it was now.
Yeah.
But I'm a little sick on this podcast, so if there's a coughing fit or whatever, excuse excuse what comes through. But do you want to maybe provide a brief background about yourself, Jahred, and then we'll go straight into some of the questions I've got.
Yeah, sweet man. So yeah, my name's Jahred Dell. I've been training since about 2012. Jiu-jitsu mainly, well, yeah, jiu-jitsu since 2012. I'm a high school teacher based here in New Zealand. I run the Articulate BJJ podcast blog. And yeah, I'm just an active competitor and coach, train, and yeah, that's pretty much me.
How'd you get involved with New Wave and coming over to train there?
So yeah, it was certainly a case of like who you know, not what you know, because I'm definitely not at those guys' level. But the owner of Future Jiu Jitsu here in New Zealand and Future Kimonos is a good friend of mine. So James
Ah,
McComb. And so he's now based in Austin. He opened Future Jiu Jitsu here in New Zealand about 3 years ago.
yeah.
He brought me on as a coach, and we'd been working together through my blog, and I'd done some work for like kind of ad space and copy for Future Kimonos. And then essentially it kind of lined up with one of my term breaks, and I said, okay, well, COVID's over now. We're past this. Time to travel again. Messaged him and said, "Hey, would it be okay if I came over for about 10 days or um, to come and train?" And he had a bit of a chat with the team there. They were pretty happy with me coming over, and yeah, then that was pretty much it.
Interesting. So what? So do you do ad copy and stuff like that? That's like kind of on the side of your teaching and things. You kind of
Yeah,
you
so
dabble in that space.
Yeah, I not so much anymore, but initially when I came right out of university in God, when did I finish university? Around 2012. I did a lot of like freelance journalism, sports writing, copywriting, and
Oh
things
wow.
like that, just to try and make ends meet. And I think that all of that stuff really kind of inspired me to, well, it all led to me starting the blog once I'd started training jiu-jitsu
Yeah.
regularly. Yeah.
Nice. So I guess the question I have around the new wave stuff. How does the level of jiu-jitsu differ that you've found between countries? So I mean that obvious one is yes, new wave in USA versus New Zealand will probably be an obvious one. But if you have any other experiences too, how do you see that differ?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll try and paint this context as best as I can. Without, I mean, I've only been there for 10 days, so it's not like I'm about to lift the lid on any kind of mysteries or anything. But I mean, these dudes are the best in the world, man. Like, you walk, it was so crazy being able to walk into that training room every day and, you're able to download with some of the best guys in the sport, and multi-sport champions as well, So, I think the biggest difference I'd have to say right off the bat is the level of professionalism that the guys bring into their training.
Mm,
A lot of people in New Zealand, well, I would guess any hobbyist gym really, not necessarily just New Zealand, but I think a lot of people come in there like training to get their gym taps and like kind of win in the training room.
mm.
Whereas the thing that I noticed with the attitude that all of the guys bring to their training at New Wave is just that they are 100% there to learn. They're 100% there to work towards failure. And that was, I mean, I'm still decompressing so much of what I tried to learn there, but that was the biggest caliber of difference for me is that these guys weren't going and like, I'm only going to drill until like I'm feeling a little bit tired when I might be fucking up the technique or something, They're going like, I'm going to drill this until I fail. Like, I'm gonna try this move until I fail. They're trying to
Mm.
reach that failure parameter so that they can get the most learning out. Um, and there was just like there, for everything everybody wants to say about the personalities of professional jiu-jitsu, I'm still 100% convinced that if I grabbed any one of those guys in the training room during a training session and I was like, "Hey, what's your name?" they wouldn't be able to tell me because they've just kind of like completely blanked their ego and they're just fully engaged in the learning. So that's something that I've really tried to like bring back and inform in my own training and coaching, but beyond that, like the New Zealand scene is still very, very small. We don't have like a massive critical mass of people. The
Mm.
sport is burgeoning here. It's certainly growing, and it's kind of on that cusp of becoming like popular sport. Um, but yeah, we have a relatively small population of 4 million people here in the whole of New Zealand. I think isn't that the population of Austin itself?
I think Austin's I think Austin's one
Oh,
city.
okay.
I need to double check
Oh,
that.
okay. So, I mean, that's one of the things I found interesting is Austin, like I think big city in America, you've actually got the same population as here in Auckland, New Zealand.
Mm.
So it's a relative size similarity, and it was kind of the same distance driving around everywhere. Um, Auckland here, so we're kind of in the capitals, well, not capital, but the main city of New Zealand. We've kind of got that critical mass of people. It's certainly where the most people in the country train. But as you kind of go around the country, you see a lot of like kind of that old school way of training still.
Mm.
Um, you see the cult of personality stuff coming out a lot in a lot of schools. That kind of old tribalistic way of like no creonch, don't train in other places.
Oh, yeah.
So it's because I've kind of had the blog and been on social media for quite a while, quite early into the in jiu-jitsu here, comparatively to everybody else anyway. But it's been a real kind of pet project of mine to try and break that down. Because yeah, it's in a small place like here, if people aren't working together, we're not really going to be able to make that breakthrough onto the world
Mm.
stage at any place. Australia figured that out like a while
Yeah.
ago, hence why we've got amazing guys like Lachlan and Craig, Declan, Moody, and all of these guys starting to come up is because they've gone, hey, well, we actually just need to work together and train together. And yeah, I feel like if New Zealand can do that, I mean, we punch way above our weight in a lot of other elite sports, but
Yeah.
it'll take that kind of move to be able to make the difference. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. And you obviously mentioned about the way that I guess the professionalism that they brought, at least the New Wave crew when you were training with them. I guess how were the sessions structured, as you mentioned there, around drilling those techniques? And I guess what are you taking to your own classes from there in terms of teaching techniques?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of class structure and things, it's not wasn't very different to what you'd imagine in most schools, I'd imagine anyway. But like you start with technique, you start with drilling. Positional rounds was a big emphasis as well, and then moving into matches or sparring after that, which was actually because, well, I suppose they're not in a camp for anything right now, but that was less of an emphasis, I suppose. It was more like
Yeah.
the skill acquisition side, and that was really, really enjoyable. And I mean, when you're doing an hour plus of technique, I mean, you're going to be tired from that alone. And I think, yes, rolling is the fun part for sure. Like, I think we all love to roll, but I think we're often quite negligent of that skill acquisition part. And it's certainly not like, okay, go drill this 100 times or go do 50 reps and then the other person does 50 reps. I think that those kind of putting arbitrary numbers on something is not the point. But certainly being, from a coaching perspective, the thing that it's made me think about is to go, okay, well, we're going to drill and we're going to acquire skill until everybody's getting this right, or until I'm seeing common mistakes happening and then potentially correct that. Or so from a education or teaching perspective, it really kind of like there were just small nuances about the way that it's approached that I was like, wow, there's a lot of kind of intangibles that are going on that you have to take back into your own teaching or your own instructional space.
Mm.
And yeah, that was really informing for me, and just really encouraging as well. That I was like, okay, well, I wasn't super far off in the first place. Like, I'm certainly not okay, well, we're going to go and line drill and everything forever.
Yeah.
I certainly think there's a place for that, but yeah, the best guys in the world are definitely not shrimping up and down the mats for half hour.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you there in terms of making, I guess, skipping those generic warm-ups and using the technique as the warm-up too. But I guess along the same lines, your top tips then for retaining new techniques, because I think, as you mentioned, we can drill a new technique in class over and over, but obviously you're presented with the same situation. So as soon as someone starts putting some pressure on or provides like a new situation, then that technique doesn't work anymore, and you kind of abandon it and almost kind of forget about the technique altogether and never use it again.
Yeah.
So I guess what tips do you have for someone to help retain new techniques and I guess practice them so they actually become usable when they're rolling?
Yeah, man. I think I mean, that's at the crux of what we're doing, right? Like,
Mm.
when it comes to learning and improving. And I think, well, the biggest thing for me is like, if I've learned it, I'm gonna go and do it. And I'm gonna do it in that same session that I learned it.
Hmm.
By do it, I mean try it
Yeah.
and hopefully fail. Like, the time where you've just learned that technique is the best time to try and hit somebody with it. Not, I'll do that as a coach just to like actually go, hey, this is the point I'm trying to make. But also from my own training, if I go and see something like, John, or my coaches here are showing me something, I'm going to go, fuck, I want to go and hit that right now. I want to go and try that and see what parameters it does work at and what it doesn't work at. Because I think if you don't immediately try and imprint that onto onto your body and into your mind, that you're not really putting an onus on yourself to go out and try that again. For most people, the average practitioner and the average hobbyist, by the time the next week rolls around, they're learning a new technique.
Mm.
I mean, for some, the next class rolls around and they're learning a new technique, which, I mean, are you even going to remember what you just did? So I think it's an imperative that you go and try and get that thing to work right away. Um, that depends on how seriously a person's taking their training. Like, it depends on what they're trying to inform in their own training. But certainly, like, I think that's a really important step. There's no point just being like, oh, okay, here's a move I'm doing, drill it, and then completely forget about it. Because, I mean, then it's never going to work in live training. If you're not willing to try it in that session, when are you going to try it?
Yeah, you see that a lot where at the end of class, then it's free rolling and everyone's just back to rolling whatever, but not trying to use that technique.
Yeah,
But then I
still
guess most
trying to
people
win
don't.
with the same shit.
Yeah, yeah. Or they don't use the technique because now everyone's privy to it because they just did it in class so everyone can defend it.
Yeah,
But yeah, as you
that's
mentioned, it's still worth doing.
yeah, that's the most fun part is like this person knows what's coming and then you hit them anyway. That's like the biggest flex that you can do.
That's true. That's true. You don't
Yeah.
want to be the one on the receiving end getting done by a technique you just learned.
Yeah. And that's where you innovate on your defense. That's where you have to go like, oh damn, I'm actually stuck in the move of the night. I don't want to get hit by this thing. Okay, well, how do I defend it? So, I mean, it all depends on how much a person wants to trust in the process and actually like engage deeply with the material. Like, it's the same as if I take this to students in a class and I go, I want you to write about, a book you've just read. And a kid might just give me like the standard blurb, this was about this character and this. And I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. But it's the kid that always takes it further, that is going to do better and is flexing their brain a bit more. We're still using our brain in jiu-jitsu. Yes, we're using our body a big amount. But if you've just learned content, if you want to retain it, you got to go and revise. And the rolling is revision for us. Like, so
Mm.
I feel like people tend to lean back on their strengths because they look at rolling in the wrong way. Um, Not always, but I think a large amount of hobbyists, they're still going like, man, okay, cool, I've just slapped and bumped. How am I going to win? Like, they're not going,
Yeah.
okay, well, how am I going to get to that move we just learned tonight? How am I going to try that thing out? Or how am I going to do something new? Like, how am I going to change my rolling and work on my weaknesses? So, yeah.
Yeah, those are good points to have. So you're not always trying to just dominate and win, I guess, at your strengths when you're going into role and just actually trying or just doing what you're shit at.
Yeah, yeah.
Basically, yeah.
I mean, I don't think that there's anything wrong with trying to win in a role. Like, I mean, the point of our sport is to try and is to try and control and submit somebody. But like, give yourself parameters with that. Like when I roll with a student, I'm not just going to go like, okay, well, I'm just going to rack up subs. Yeah, cool. Like I've been training for 10 years and this guy's been training for 6 weeks. What are either of us getting out of me just going and heel hooking him 25 times in a round? You know, like nothing. So if I go, okay, well, I just showed him an armbar from mount. That's all I'm gonna do. And cool, I might hit him with that 20 times. He's certainly going to remember that technique. But then we've both taken something away. Then there's actually an interchange. And so I think that I mean, we can't just not win. Like, we can't just not sub a guy. We can't just give up bad positions because that's an injustice in itself. I think there's nothing worse than rolling with a guy who just isn't trying. Like,
Mm.
that, I kind of just want to walk away from that role. And I have, but I think it's important to try. It's important to try something new. And it's important to give yourself small and measurable goals because I think that's how you improve, you know?
Nice. And you've
Yeah.
competed at a pretty high level too. ADCC trials. Uh, what else have you got under your belt there?
Yeah, so I competed at ADCC trials last year. I then I fought Isaac Michelle in the semis. And then so obviously I didn't qualify. You have to win. He won. Um, but I then went on to Vegas after that to compete in the ADCC Open that ran before the ADCC Championships. I got to the semis in that as well. I got to the repechage for bronze as well. So yeah, I've been trying to push. I mean, each time I've been one place better. So I'm hoping the next time we're on the podium. I mean,
Nice.
ideally, I'd love to be at the top of the podium for the next Oceania trials. I do believe they're having two more trials. Well, they're having two trials rather than just the one Oceania trials this time around. So potentially there's two shots there. And I mean, if I can just put myself in contention at under 99, I'll be pretty happy, man. But yeah, what else? I mean, pretty much won everything here in New Zealand a few times over. The competition scene's growing quite a bit here. There's a lot more competitions going on, lots of
Mm.
different rule sets. I've competed in Australia a bunch, under grappling industries rules. Especially if you're traveling from New Zealand to Australia, you kind of want to get bang for your buck. And there's a lot of people who kind of want to just bucket list IBJJF comp and get wasted in their first match and pay X amount of hundreds of dollars. But if I can line up a grappling industries competition and I can go, okay, well, I can get like upwards of 11 matches, that's great. So I've done, I think, a handful of those, gi, no gi, absolute, things like that. I competed in the States as well earlier in about 2019, like pre-COVID, feels like forever ago, but competed in California at the what is it, Fuji BJJ Open in Simi Valley up north, which was quite fun. Placed gold in the no gi division in that, and bronze in the gi division. But yeah, I just try to get out there and do it as much as possible. The caliber of competition here in New Zealand isn't super low. I mean, there's still super challenging guys in competitions when you get a good solid bracket or some of the guys come out. So yeah, just try to put what I've learned into place in competition and try new things and yeah, it's
Nice.
yeah, I never really started the sport with competition in mind, to be honest with you, man. Like when I decided in 2014 that I was gonna like train every day, I was just like, okay, cool. Well, I just need to like kind of regain my health. That was more the thing. And then I mean, competitions kind of came up, and I just realized and kind of embraced that that was part of the learning process. And like I'm a pretty competitive person, so I've been able to embrace that side of it. I think a lot of people, when they feel that kind of intensity, they either lean into it or push away from it. And I'm certainly one who's kind of leaned into it a bit. So yeah.
Before getting back to the podcast, I want to let you know there's a link down in the description for the Sweet Arts of Fighting underground community. You can get all the help you need for your combat sports training. You get every single Sweet Arts of Fighting training program, online course, and you get access to a range of coaches within the private Discord community. So go check that out, and back to the podcast. That's good. I guess from all these competitions and people you've fought against as well, what are the differentiators at the highest level of jiu-jitsu in terms of guys who are there at the top versus guys who are maybe, just shy of getting there? What kind of separates those two kind of jiu-jitsu athletes?
Man, that's a good question. Um, I think it's like the if I had to put my finger on one thing, it would be like the timing, the lack of hesitation and the like the knowledge of the pathway that you're gonna go down. I was really fortunate to have a match with Mike Pixley from Pedigo Submission Fighters when I fought at ADCC in Vegas in the Open. And the thing that I was just like, I couldn't even be mad that the dude submitted me, bro. Like, I was just so stoked to like feel the pathway that he took me down with so little hesitation along the way and like no errors. And I think it's just as soon as I felt that, I was like, holy smokes, I learned so much from just that. And yeah, so for me, that that kind of epitomized, I was like, holy, like that level is not necessarily about knowing more or about being able to throw shit at a guy that he's never seen before. Because every like you get to blue belt, and if you're a competitor, you kind of seen every move. But it's more like your mindset. It's how ready you're coming in. It's all of those little intangible things, your confidence and your timing and your willingness to pull the trigger. I think that those things, I was like, man, okay, well, that's what differentiates world class from just everybody else. And yeah, that was a big eye opener and really cool to feel. And yeah, I think I learned more in those 2 minutes with them than I learned in like 2 years before, like of competing. So yeah.
I'm assuming, I guess that willingness to pull the trigger is also down to having the confidence that you can get yourself out of bad positions or things like that too. So you need to almost, it's like you have to have the skill set already to have that confidence to be able to do those things anyway.
Yeah, bro. Yeah, I really have to second what you're saying there. Like, I think, if your defense isn't sound, and I was just saying this to one of my new students last night. He's like three rolls in, and I was like, if your defense isn't sound, you're not gonna have that confidence to pull the trigger. Like that is, in my opinion, anyway. Your defense, your ability to escape things and to take advantage or to turn around bad positions is what gives you the consummate confidence to be able to go in and go, as badly as this goes, I'll be okay.
Yeah.
And I still see guys at like brown belt and black belt level that are terrified to not be in an advantageous position. Advantageous, like, oh, if I'm on the bottom, I'm losing. How can you think that way when like the sport that we're literally doing was developed so that you've got tools off of your back,
Yeah.
that's a thing that blows my mind. And of course, with the prevalence now of ADCC and MMA and that rule set, we're kind of going full cycle to being on top is winning again,
Yeah.
which is not wrong. Like in any self-defense situation, in any combat scenario, having the higher ground or being on top is always going to be a more favorable place to be. But what happens when you're not there? Like
Mm.
that's the big question. And I think if you don't have the answer to that question, how can you really go into a match? How can you go into a fight? How can you defend yourself with that question in the back of your mind properly? And I see that with the same with guys who aren't conditioned well, and they roll in a way where they are scared to get tired.
Mm.
And I mean, I love that saying of fatigue makes cowards of us all. But I think the same thing applies with being on the bottom or not having a good guard or not being able to work from those disadvantageous positions. If you're going, holy shit, I'm so scared to be there, how can you honestly say to yourself that you've really engaged deeply with the sport of jiu-jitsu?
Yeah.
Like I don't think that you have. Maybe then you've been a wrestler. That's great, but then you're a great wrestler. But work your guard. You never even need to use it, and that's
Mm.
cool. But yeah, you need to have that last word because there's a lot of what ifs out there, and there's a lot of people who are going to put you on your back, and then what do you do?
Yeah. We've had some great chats on this podcast previously talking about, I guess, constraints based coaching and basically getting to know all the different situations that you might be put in and training those specific situations that you might be put in so you're actually prepared. And that's just one of them, right? Like, yeah, as you mentioned, yeah, sure, you might like to be on top or be the aggressor and be in the dominant positions, but like you can like that. But then when you're maybe training, when you're rolling after class, maybe you start on sitting down or on your back or whatever it is, just so you can be in those positions from the very beginning and try and work your way out.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think that's been one of my biggest immediate takeaways from training in Texas was we do situational every night from bad positions now.
Mm,
I want to get the guys to a point where we can actually just do juji rounds. So the guy starts in an armbar.
mm,
It takes a while and it takes a level of maturity to do that in a non-professional training room, but we were doing that a lot. But we instead of that, I'm doing backgrounds. So you're starting with a guy on your back and you're in turtle. Terrible place to be. Like literally the worst place to start a roll. Under mount. So mount rounds and back rounds are now a non-negotiable. We do that every night with no clock on. So
oh, okay.
yeah, and it's interesting to see because you put 6 minutes on a clock, right? Everybody knows how much jujitsu they can do in 6 minutes, or
Yeah.
how hard they can go in 6 minutes. You turn the clock off, and you don't tell them how long the round's going to be, and you see how they change. And the guy either becomes way more conservative, the guy starts to do things differently, the pace changes, the mindset changes. You start to see who's actually got the conditioning, who's suddenly going to go and prop the wall up and starts fucking talking during the rolls and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I think that is another kind of parameter I've put in there. And it's like,
I like that.
are you willing to then push yourself to the point where you're so fucked that only your technique's going to work?
Mm.
And the guys that engage in that are just going to like get way better, way quicker.
Nice. We have a great class on Friday afternoons at Val Jiu Jitsu here, and it's position basically a positional sparring class. 1 minute on, 10 or 15 seconds off, and we just rotate around, and we just start back positions, mount, side control, you know, just anything that sucks,
Yeah,
and it's just for the whole hour like that. It's damn
that's
good, and
awesome.
it's killer. It's killer, but it's good because you end up starting with someone on your back every minute or every 2 minutes, or someone in mount or someone whatever, and you have to work your way out in that minute. So that's
Yeah.
quite nice. Yeah,
No, that's awesome. And I think positional rounds are underrated, man. I
yeah,
think you can't do enough of them. It gives you a level of psychological confidence that you don't just get from normal rolling. Because like, you get to a certain level with jiu-jitsu where you maybe nobody gets on your back like for a long period of time. Then you get
mm,
into a competition match, and that's all that this dude wants to do. Are you really going to have all the answers to the guy who's now just chasing you back? You're not. But if you've been drilling that in the gym, now you're suddenly in a position where you can go, I don't care if this dude's on my back or in mount because I know what to do there. So I think there's a lot to be said for positional and situational rounds. And yeah, I really hope that people can embrace that really sucky part of it, because it sucks. It's not fun.
Yeah.
Like, but people need to learn that not fun part is actually the fun part. And I think if people can do the hard stuff more regularly and embrace that, we can kind of get jujitsu back to a place where a jujitsu fighter is actually someone who's feared and tough, even if you don't have to be a professional, you can be a hobbyist, but man, be a fucking tough hobbyist to kill. And, now you've got a level of confidence that you can, A, walk around with, protect your family with, but then also be a super, super hard role in the gym. And then suddenly the competitors are like pursuing a role with you. And they want to roll with you, and then you're getting better because you're getting the rub from them. So I
Mm,
think it's just a win-win if people learn to embrace that suck a little bit more. Yeah.
yeah. How does a typical training week look for you as someone who works full time, but is
Yeah.
also, I guess, coaching and you still trying to prepare for competitions?
Yeah. So I just train every day, bro, except for Sunday. Um, I finish work in the early afternoon. Usually get home, get my shit together, and then go to the gym. And usually my training is from about like 6 o'clock to about 8 o'clock, so I'll get 2 hours in. Usually the first hour is kind of me giving instruction and helping everybody else get better. And then I'm pretty much just jumping in on my own class really and training with
Mm,
everybody, you know, practicing and either doing positional rounds and sparring. Um, I've kind of started to pare back on sparring every night because I kind of have to leave some for my own self. Like my Wednesday and my Saturday are like my own training. So I don't coach on a Wednesday and a Saturday at the moment. Those are the nights after train. Well, Saturday I don't work, but at midday I'll go and train under one of my coaches and just be the learner, and
mhm.
the same on a Wednesday night. But yeah, it's a lot to do in a week. I mean, yeah, teaching is very mentally demanding. It's not like a physically demanding job. So the whole battle for me is about preserving as much of my mental energy to train, to coach, and to go through skill acquisition um, in each session. So yeah, it's always a very fine battle, and it's like really walking a bit of a razor's edge.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess that's just part of the process. I certainly don't bemoan it. I mean, I've been teaching for as long as I've been training, and I've been doing them side by side. So I kind of just don't know another way to do it.
Yeah.
And then yeah, in the lead up to competitions as well, I then will find 2 nights a week where I can also do some weightlifting, some
Yeah.
strength and conditioning things. Um, but yeah, it's always that fine line between finding overtraining and things like that. I don't you know I don't use steroids or anything like that. I'm 31 and my body's in relatively good shape. And yeah, I can't pride myself on being a natural athlete. So I mean, I suppose things would be a whole lot easier if I was on TRT or things like that, or doing train cycles. But you know, I mean, for professionals these days, you pretty much have to be doing those things just to make it work. So I certainly don't judge anyone for doing that if that's the choices they wanted to make. Being a full-time and professional athlete in anything has its demands and its sacrifices, and that's pretty much just part of it these days. I think if anybody thinks that jujitsu is the Wild West, and it's solely jujitsu that has that problem, they're being a bit naive.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's just that's literally the life of any professional athlete now. And, for me, recovery time is my Sunday. That's a no training day. I don't even teach privates on that day at all. And yeah, I try actually to just do some like active recovery stuff, if anything. But yeah.
Yeah. Nice. So does that mean you don't do strength and conditioning training when you don't have a competition? You only do extras when you have a competition upcoming?
Not strictly, nah. Yeah, I mean, it depends if I feel like it or if I have the time, honestly.
Yeah.
I certainly will try to maintain that as much as possible and do some like kind of baseline things throughout the week. But it can be pretty challenging,
Yeah.
especially with a full training load. I certainly don't want to strain my central nervous system beyond the point where I'm not actually going to be improving at jujitsu.
Yeah.
So, at the moment, like once a week, I might go in and get some pull-ups, basic push-pull, nothing like near PRs or anything like that.
Yeah.
Just to kind of work certain areas or certain muscle groups that I feel like, oh, okay, that's not hurting right now. Like
Yeah.
I can actually push this to a point of like near failure, or I can get this muscle group to maybe fire at a level where I can get some gains out of it. But it's really, yeah, it's it's a game of inches at this stage, It's not like I'm about to go in and lift and put in a ton of like get a ton of gains out of it, because I mean I've been doing it for years. So it's all about just, like you're kind of just turning dials and adjusting
Mhm.
things and seeing what works out. Um, I used to push it way too hard, and I'd like lift every day before training.
Yeah.
And then I was wondering why I was getting worse at jujitsu. And like, I mean, of course, strength plays an element. But I'm a full-time teacher. I lift 2 times a week, and I certainly still don't feel outgunned strength-wise by some of the best guys. So
Mm.
I don't, I think there's something to be said for strength and conditioning, but like there's a lot of people who want to double down on it rather
Yeah.
than doing jujitsu. And it's like, if you want to get better at jujitsu, lifting weights isn't always going to help you. Like sometimes the more optimal way to get better at jujitsu is to do more jujitsu. So I always try to just make sure that I'm saving my bandwidth and my body's bandwidth to do that as much as possible and as optimally as possible. But
Nice.
yeah.
Yeah. No. Did you know you can represent Sweet Arts of Fighting while you're training? We're more than just a membership. We also have rash guards and shorts. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see that we have the Sweet Arts of Fighting 2.0 shorts, and we also have the Sweet Arts of Fighting short and long sleeve rash guard. There is another design coming soon, but you can get those on xmarshall.com, and you can go down the description and you can find that. And back to the podcast. I'm with you on that too, in terms of, yeah, some people just like to double down and kind of, hit the gym, get bigger, get stronger, and that's going to be
Mm.
their saving grace. But I mean, as you mentioned, there's guys that are just grappling strong, and you
Yeah.
get on the mats with them, you're like, what the hell? You like haven't felt this before, and they might not be stronger than you in the gym, but on the mats you feel that pressure, and
Yeah.
it's another level.
100%, man. I mean, I think I certainly fit into that camp, like I've gone and lifted with a few of my mates who, their PB squat or their PB deadlift is way higher than where mine is right now. But like when I get my hands on them, I'm like gonna melt them with that isometric strength that you've built up from a decade of consistent training. And I certainly don't want to put myself into a deficit where the lifting means that I'm now either having to miss trainings or
Yeah,
things like that. Because cool, if my goal is just to be healthy and look good and things like that, then absolutely lifting has a huge place in that. And maybe doing less jujitsu is actually better if that's your goal.
yeah,
But for me, I just want to get really good at the sport, man. So yeah, I'm just gonna keep doing that, and if I can find some S&C in the in between to help me out, then absolutely, I'm gonna. But yeah, I try to make the jujitsu the first priority when it comes to getting better at jujitsu. Who would
Yeah.
have thought, eh? Yeah,
Groundbreaking. Yeah,
yeah.
I was rolling with the Tackett brothers last
Oh
week,
yeah,
no, week before, and man, just like even just that pressure from those guys is like another level. It's like fuck,
yeah,
and yeah, as you mentioned, it's like they might not be stronger, but on the mats, like yeah, I was fucked. I
yeah,
was fucked after a
yeah.
couple of rounds of that.
Man, yeah, I've seen how they've rolled. I mean, I was fortunate enough to watch them at the Open as well. I think Andrew Tackett did the won the absolute as well in the at the Vegas Open. And man, just the yeah, those guys' work ethic is crazy, eh? Like, it's awesome to watch.
Yeah, definitely.
I think
How
if
do
I
you
rolled
see?
like that, I'd have a heart attack though, eh? Like, I'm firmly a heavyweight, eh? Like, if I rolled like that, I'd fucking die.
Less dynamic, like what do they call it, like panda jiu-jitsu or something?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
slow.
something along those lines, eh? Guerrilla jiu-jitsu, yeah.
Gorilla. So how do you see the future of professional jiu-jitsu going? Because obviously now there's a little more prize money coming into it. ADCC is becoming a lot more popular. It's kind of almost seen as like I guess you could say the pinnacle of jiu-jitsu now. Nogi's kind of taken over. Like even here in Austin, there's like I've competed in a couple of super fights here. There's like super fights every damn weekend,
Mm,
cards, and it's free, which is damn cool. So I don't
mm,
mind competing in those and not paying. But
yeah.
where do you see I guess professional jiu-jitsu going in the future in terms of prize money, professionalism? Will people start being able to train full time? Will there be funding for that kind of stuff?
Yeah, man. I mean, it's an interesting one, right? Because there's so many dynamics to put into that it's like quite hard to, I mean, yeah, the crystal ball still seems a little bit murky on it, you know? I mean, there's so many different federations and organizations and stuff now that I think the sport element of jiu-jitsu is pretty much maxed out, right? Like we're at a terminal mass of competitions. And one thing that I've kind of started to realize recently, especially since we've started putting on our own kind of promotion, the Future Cup at the gym, which is we're not running another competition. It's a spectator spectacle, you know, like I'm just doing 5 super fights in a night. Um, so real dynamic, real, and we're charging people on the door. So it's like entertainment, right?
Hmm.
Versus going to a competition on a weekend and seeing brackets and all of that stuff, and you know, a guy doing multiple matches. It seems like the path's diverging a lot between those two. I mean, I think that that's like the most objective observation that I can really make about it. Um, I think that each has its own place. You know, like a lot of guys are still going to establish their name and actually get better at jujitsu by engaging with that sports side. So I think that that's probably always going to be there. I think we're well beyond the reality that this would ever become a Olympic sport now. I don't see a pathway to that happening. You know,
Yeah.
like you know, our biggest organizations, ADCC and IBJJF, are both profit driven organizations. I think the first criteria for an Olympic sport is that it has to be like a non-profit for a start, like a federation
Mm.
has to be a non-profit. So I don't think we don't even get past that. So I honestly I think that that would hurt the sport more than anything anyway. So it's neither here nor there. But the way that the sport elements established now, whatever rule set we want to call it, you know, SJJF, IBJJF, CB, whatever, I think that there's a certain critical mass to that now, and there'll always be merit to winning that, and I think that it draws attention to people who are successful athletes and successful competitors, and that might help them skyrocket towards that more like kind of professional level where now they're getting onto things like a who's number one card, or you know, getting super fights at local competitions or local promotions, and Yeah, I mean, there certainly seems to be a larger capacity now for people to actually make money from jiu-jitsu, whether that's instructing, putting out instructionals, creating content, and I mean that has its positives and it has its negatives. I mean, I think there's a lot of bullshit out there, for sure.
To say the least.
Yeah, yeah. But, through all of that, there does seem to be those kind of guys who have found a strong niche, but are also putting out really sound technique. They're putting out sound advice for people. They're putting out great content. And, I think that that's the most awesome side to see, even away from like professional competition or whatever, is that there's people who can now create content that can also go full time, because that adds another element to the sport as well. I mean, if
Mm.
you look at professional wrestling or you look at the UFC, there are fleets of people who make a living off of commenting off of the sport.
Yeah.
There's people who do analysis. There's people who do all of that, and I think that now that we're getting that second layer deep in jiu-jitsu, I think that that's only positive for the growth of the sport because you need more people talking about it. We don't need more people doing it because that's kind of a vacuum, You can have
Yeah.
3,000 members at a gym, and if none of them are talking about it, it's not going to become something that's in the popular kind of consciousness, So we need people that can bridge that gap. We need people who can communicate. We need content creators. We need people who can get on the mic at events and do commentary and things like that to actually translate this very niche sport to an audience of people who may not actually be deeply invested or they might be casual observers. Like if we think about like pro wrestling, man, that's it's a fucking niche sport, but it's massive. How did they
Mhm.
bridge that? They didn't bridge it by doing more of it. They bridged it by communicating it better, by packaging a product better, and by making it digestible for the casual person to watch and be entertained by. I
Mm.
think jiu-jitsu has the same capacity, and I think that something like an ADCC rule set is potentially the rule set that's helping that to happen the most
Yeah.
at the moment. I mean, everything has its place. I mean, a while ago it would have been EBI rules. I think helped to increase popularity a lot until we saw people bringing in sports element of trying to gamify like the rule set and things.
Mm.
EBI rules has a lot of capacity to be gamed. Like, okay, well, I'm gonna just turtle the whole round.
Yeah, and
The
just wait for
fuck wants to
overtime.
watch that, bro?
Yeah.
So, now we've got combat jujitsu and seeing how popular that's getting. I think that honestly, that's a better move away than going back to like full EBI rules or submission only, because those are great if you do the sport.
Mm.
But how do I get like my parents to sit down and watch a 45-minute sub only match? Jesus Christ, like no one's going to want to watch that, man.
Yeah.
Um, so I feel like making the product digestible for people is a huge part. If I can put on 5 matches that are under ADCC rule set, and I can say to an audience of people who've just come to support someone because they know them and they've paid $35 at the door, I'm going to be like, this is an electrifying rule set. It's entertaining. The person on top is the one that's winning. The submission finishes the fight. Action. Like you're gonna see takedowns, you're gonna see big moves. The audience is gonna go, oh, okay, cool, I get that.
Yeah.
I don't need to know like any technical terms or anything. I just need to know that this person like who is dominating this is winning. So I feel like, that's obviously making a big play for the public consciousness, if you want to call it that, and making the sport a breakthrough. Yeah, really.
Yeah. I mean, if you
Yeah,
think about the UFC, like how many people watch the UFC that don't train any combat sports?
exactly.
And that's kind of like their big money maker. And it's
Mm.
kind of that's hard for jiu-jitsu though, just because as you mentioned, yeah, it's like it's harder to understand for the general person. And I guess it's if someone's not into grappling, it's not I guess you could say it's not that exciting from someone from the outside looking at two dudes hugging each other for 10
Yeah.
minutes, you know,
Yeah.
and doing some weird things with legs.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, we've had things like Quintet and other invitationals on the UFC Fight Pass that have tried to bridge the gap. I don't know how popular they've been. I don't know the numbers on what the engagement with those was like. I think it would have been very interesting to see what happened with ADCC trials and the championship being televised on Fight Pass, but I guess we'll never know. Um, but you know, that between the Flow Grappling and the UFC Fight Pass deal, I think also kind of signifies a place in where the sport's going to go. You know, it certainly feels like Flow Grappling is certainly more like um, you're kind of going to be involved in the sport to buy a Flow Grappling pass. You know, um, so it'll be interesting to see how that kind of develops, you know. Having been in Vegas for the actual ADCC championships, I mean, man, that place was packed. So from a spectator perspective, you know, even if we can get 10,000 jiu-jitsu people into an arena, that's pretty fucking cool. Like,
Yeah.
I think there are enough people that practice that have skin in the game that will want to actually come and watch and make this thing a spectator sport. I certainly don't think it's impossible. But if we want this sport to actually skyrocket and be the next football, um, we need to find a way to bridge that for casuals, yeah, or like people who just don't track.
Yeah. No, exactly. No, this has been a great chat, Jared. If people want to find you and follow you and see, you know, what you're doing and follow you for your next competition, where can they do that?
Yeah, so best place to do that is probably on Instagram at Articulate BJJ. I've got a YouTube page, and everything's by the same name, so everything's Articulate BJJ. I've got some podcast episodes on Spotify and things where I discuss some of the things that we've talked about today, but also some other kind of like conceptual things. But yeah, Facebook, Instagram, usually the go-to there. So yeah, that's pretty much where people can find me.
Perfect. And I'll link all those up in the description too when this gets published soon. But
Cool.
thanks for coming on, Jared. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, awesome, bro. Thanks so much for having me, man. Great chat.